They never saw it coming, did they? The way you rose, the way you shattered every expectation they placed on you. They mocked you when you were silent. They laughed when you hesitated. They spoke of you as if you were nothing more than a shadow, a fleeting whisper in a world that only remembers the loud. But now they sit in the ruins of their own arrogance, watching, helpless, as the foundation they built on your downfall crumbles beneath their feet. But let's not rush to the ending just yet. Let's start where they thought your story would end. At the moment they convinced you that you were never going to make it. Do you remember it? That moment when the weight of their words pressed down on your chest like a vice, making you question if maybe, just maybe, they were right. The way they looked at you with that smug certainty, as if your failure was already written in stone. And for a while, you believed it. You carried their doubt like chains around your ankles, dragging it through every step you took, every dream you let slip through your fingers. You told yourself it was safer that way, safer to stay in the background, to dim your own light so you wouldn't have to face their judgment. But what if I told you that every second you spent doubting yourself, every time you let their words sink into your bones, you weren't just betraying yourself, you were building something they were too blind to see. Because while they were busy underestimating you, you were gathering every ounce of their doubt, every insult, every dismissal, and stacking them brick by brick. You weren't falling, you were constructing the very stage upon which they would watch their own downfall. Did you ever stop to wonder why they needed you to fail? Why your potential terrified them? It was never about you being incapable. It was about them knowing that if you ever saw yourself clearly, if you ever recognized what you were truly capable of, you would expose them for what they are. They weren't stronger than you. They were just counting on your belief that they were. They needed you to stay small because the moment you stood tall, you would make them shrink in comparison. And yet, here we are. They laughed and you swallowed it. They doubted and you accepted it. They convinced you to clip your own wings and you let them. But here's the question. Why? Why did you believe them? Why did their words carry more weight than your own? Who told you that their judgment was more valid than the fire in your chest? Who convinced you that you were meant to live as a footnote in a story where you should have been the headline? Look around. Look at the life you settled for, the choices you didn't make, the moments you let slip by because you thought you weren't worthy of them. Now look at them, the ones who once mocked you, the ones who whispered behind your back confident that you would never rise beyond their reach. They sit there now, watching as the world they built on borrowed confidence begins to crack. And do you know why? Because they never prepared for this. They never thought you would wake up. But here you are, breathing, existing, rising. This was never about proving them wrong. This was about proving yourself right. Because this was never their story to control. It was always yours. You just had to remember that. And now, as they watching the same person they dismissed, discarded, underestimated, you hold something they can never take back. Power. The power of a reckoning they never saw coming. Tell me, do you feel it now? The weight lifting off your shoulders, the fire returning to your chest, the way the chains that once held you are no longer there, because you were the one holding them all along? You were the one holding them. All along. That's the thing they never told you. Freedom was never something they could take away. It was something you had to claim. And now that you have, they are left with nothing but the realization that the very downfall they wished for you has become their own, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. They told you the world was a certain way, and you believed them. Not because you were weak, but because you were taught to obey before you ever learned to question. They fed you stories of limits, rules etched into your mind before you could even dream of defying them. Stay in your place. Be grateful for what you have. Don't aim too high, or you'll only fall harder. And so, you accepted it. Not because you lacked ambition, but because they made fear sound like wisdom. They spoke in whispers, their voices wrapping around you like invisible chains, so subtle you never even noticed them tightening. From the moment you could understand words, they told you what was possible and what wasn't. They painted a box around your existence and called it reality. And you, so young, so trusting, nodded and conformed. They conditioned you to believe that comfort was safety, that questioning was rebellion, that dreaming too big was foolishness. And you absorbed it all. You learned to lower your voice when you should have been roaring. You learned to shrink yourself down to fit into spaces you were meant to outgrow. You learned to watch, to wait, to stay quiet. But let's talk about the truth they never wanted you to see. The truth that threatened to unravel everything they built around you. They weren't warning you out of love. They weren't trying to protect you. They were programming you. Not for your sake, but for theirs. Because a caged bird sings only for its captors, and a mind convinced of its own limitations will never dare to escape. They needed you to believe in your own smallness, because the moment you recognized your strength, the illusion would shatter. Think about it. Every time you stepped forward, every time you dared to want more, they were there, with their cautious words, with their disapproving looks, with their subtle reminders that people like you don't rise too high. Have you ever wondered why? Why the ones who claimed to care the most were also the first to pull you back? It wasn't because they hated you, it was because they feared you. Because if you broke free, if you proved that the rules they lived by were just illusions, what would that mean for them? It would mean that they had been lying to themselves all along, that the bars of their own cages were never real, that they too could have escaped, but they chose not to. And so instead of setting themselves free, they tried to keep you trapped with them, because nothing terrifies the caged more than watching someone else learn to fly. And so you stayed. You buried your dreams under practicality. You swallowed your words before they had the chance to be spoken. You told yourself that maybe they were right, that maybe you were asking for too much, that maybe you weren't meant for more. But something changed, didn't it? Somewhere along the way, a crack formed in their carefully constructed illusion. A moment, however small, when something inside you whispered, "This can't be all there is." Maybe it was when you saw someone else, someone just like you, break free. Maybe it was when you realized that the ones who told you to settle were the same ones drowning in their own regret. Maybe it was simply a feeling, a flicker of something unshakable, something undeniable. Whatever it was, it planted a seed they didn't expect to grow. Because once you start questioning, the whole illusion begins to fall apart. The moment you stop blindly accepting, you start to see. And what you saw, what you couldn't unsee, was that the only thing keeping you caged was belief. The only power they ever had over you was the power you handed them. And now, when they say, people like us don't do things like that, you realize that it was never about people like us. It was about them, about their unwillingness to try, about their fear of what could happen if they failed. But you are not them. And that terrifies them more than anything because they see it now. The shift, the spark. The moment you stopped nodding and started thinking. The moment you stopped agreeing and started asking, why not? The moment you, after years of accepting their world, finally decided to build your own. This is where it begins, the unraveling. The moment they realize they've lost control. They thought they had you convinced. They thought they had you trapped. But they forgot one thing. A mind that has awakened can never be caged again. And now, as they watch you rise, they understand, too late, that the same chains they placed on you were never strong enough to hold you. And now they watch in fear, because if you were able to break free, what does that mean for them? And they never thought twice about you, did they? You were just another background character in their story, another nameless figure passing through their world, unnoticed and unimportant. They laughed at your silence, mistook your hesitation for weakness, assumed that your struggles were proof that you would never rise. They whispered behind your back, not with fear, but with certainty. Certainty that you would never be anything more than what they decided for you. They didn't just doubt you, they dismissed you. To them, you were nothing more than a fleeting thought, a momentary inconvenience, a shadow too small to cast anything worth fearing. You saw it in their eyes, the way they barely acknowledged you, the way they never considered you a threat. They were so sure of your failure, so convinced that you would never outgrow the limits they placed around you. And the worst part, at times, you almost believed them. But here's what they didn't see, what they were too blind, too arrogant, too foolish to recognize. While they were busy underestimating you, you were watching, you were listening, you were learning. Every insult, every dismissal, every smug assumption, they were carving something deep inside you, something they couldn't erase. They thought their words were breaking you, but in reality, they were fueling you. With every sneer, with every laugh, with every moment they looked past you, they were sharpening the edges of the storm that was about to rise. They thought you were weak because you didn't fight back. They mistook your silence for submission, but they never realized that some battles aren't won with noise. Some wars are fought in the quiet, in the solitude of a mind that refuses to surrender. They didn't understand that strength isn't always loud, that power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits, it watches, it gathers in the depths, growing stronger with every moment of doubt, every second of pain, and when it finally emerges, it is unstoppable. And now, here they are, watching as the person they once mocked becomes something they can no longer ignore, watching as their easy laughter turns into forced smiles, their arrogance twisting into something else, something they don't want to admit, fear. Because suddenly, you are no longer the invisible one, you are no longer the afterthought, you are no longer the afterthought, you are the force they never prepared for. But let's talk about the real question, the one that should burn inside you like a fire that refuses to die. How dare they? How dare they look at you and see nothing? How dare they assume that you were too weak, too small, too insignificant to ever rise beyond their expectations? How dare they think that their opinions, their judgments, their shallow assessments had the power to define you? They were wrong, and now they know it. Now, every time they see you, they feel it. That uncomfortable shift in their chest, that creeping realization that the person they once ignored is now the one standing tall. The power dynamic has shifted, and they can feel it slipping from their hands. They can pretend all they want, but they know. They know that they never should have underestimated you, because now they are watching, but this time with wide eyes and clenched jaws, because the thing they never expected, the thing they never saw coming, is happening right in front of them. You are rising, and there is nothing they can do to stop it. There is a moment, your moment, when the weight of everything came crashing down, the betrayal that cut deeper than you thought possible, the failure that made you question if you were ever meant for more, the rejection that wasn't just a closed door, but a reminder of every insecurity you had tried so hard to bury. You felt it, didn't you? The suffocating silence after the storm, the emptiness that settled in when you realized that the world wasn't going to save you. No one was coming. No one cared enough to lift you from the ground. And for a while, you stayed there. Because what else was there to do? What was the point in trying when every step forward only seemed to pull you back further? You replayed the moments over and over in your head, searching for where you went wrong, where you failed, where you weren't enough. Maybe it was when they walked away without a second thought. Maybe it was when you poured everything into something, only to watch it slip through your fingers. Maybe it was the day you looked in the mirror and didn't even recognize yourself anymore. The world didn't stop to acknowledge your pain. No one slowed down to see if you could still breathe beneath the weight of it all. They moved on, they laughed, they lived, as if your suffering was nothing more than a quiet footnote in their story. And that hurt more than the failure itself, didn't it? The realization that your pain was invisible, that your downfall wasn't even worth their time. So you sank, deeper and deeper, until the idea of staying there became easier than the idea of trying again, because trying meant risking another failure. Trying meant facing another betrayal. Trying meant opening yourself up just to be torn apart all over again. So why not stay here, in the dark, in the quiet, where no one could hurt you anymore? And yet, somewhere buried beneath the weight of it all, something refused to die. A flicker, so faint at first that you almost didn't notice it. A whisper in the back of your mind that you tried to ignore. But it was there, and it grew louder, because this was not supposed to be your ending. Think about it. Look at everything you've survived. The pain, the loss, the nights when you swore you wouldn't make it. You did. You are still here, still breathing, still standing, even if it's on shaking legs. And that means something. That means everything. So tell me, was this the moment you were supposed to break? Was this the moment where they would finally be right about you? Where you would confirm every doubt, every insult, every dismissal? Was this how your story was meant to end? No. This was the last time. The last time you let failure define you. The last time you let betrayal convince you that you were unworthy of loyalty. The last time you let rejection tell you that you weren't enough. Because they expected you to stay down, but they forgot one thing. You don't break. You rebuild. And this is where everything changes. It was never them, was it? Not entirely. The ones who doubted you, the ones who dismissed you, the ones who left you behind. They played their part, but they weren't the real enemy. No, the real war was never fought outside of you. The real battle was the one inside your own mind. The voice that whispered when no one else was around. The voice that told you that maybe they were right. It's always been there, hasn't it? Lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The moment when you were at your weakest. When the wounds were fresh. When the weight of everything felt unbearable. It didn't scream. It didn't demand. It only whispered, softly, convincingly, like an old friend. You're not good enough. You never were. It wore different masks. Sometimes it was the echo of a parent's disappointment. Sometimes it was the sting of an old lover's rejection. Sometimes it was the smirk of a teacher who told you that you would never amount to anything. It wasn't just a voice. It was a presence, a shadow that grew with every failure, every setback, every moment you hesitated. And the worst part, you believed it. You fed it. Every time you backed down from an opportunity, every time you settled for less, every time you convinced yourself that your dreams were too big, you made it stronger. You made it powerful. Until one day, it didn't even have to whisper anymore. You had already internalized it. It had become part of you. And that's how it won. Not by force, but by making you do its work for it. But now, something is different. Now you see it for what it is. Now, you recognize the enemy that has been living inside of you, twisting your thoughts, distorting your reality, and there's something you need to understand. Something that changes everything. That voice, it's a liar. It always has been. It was never the truth. It was never real. It was only ever a reflection of every fear, every insecurity, every wound that had yet to heal. It was the accumulation of every moment someone made you feel small, and you took their words as fact. But here's the thing about illusions. Once you see through them, they lose their power. And now, you see. So what are you going to do about it? Will you let it continue to rule you? Will you allow the enemy that lives inside your head to keep you from the life you were meant for? Or will you fight back? Because now you have a weapon you never had before. Awareness. And awareness changes everything. Now you know that every doubt, every fear, every moment of hesitation isn't the truth. It's the enemy speaking. And now that you recognize it, you can confront it. You can strip it of its power. You can starve it until it has no choice but to wither and die. This is the moment. The moment you stop being your own worst enemy. The moment you reclaim your mind, your thoughts, your future. The moment you stop fighting yourself and start fighting for yourself. The battle against doubt isn't easy, but now, at least, you know the truth. The only thing standing between you and everything you've ever wanted is the lie you refuse to believe anymore. They waited for it. The moment they were certain would come. The moment you would break, just like before. The moment hesitation would wrap around your ankles like chains and pull you back into the shadows where they thought you belonged. They saw the signs, or so they believed. The flicker of uncertainty in your eyes, the slight pause in your step, the way you clenched your jaw as if holding back the storm inside. And they smiled, smug, confident, convinced that history was about to repeat itself. They had seen this before. The way you started with fire, with passion, with the desperate hunger of someone who wanted more. But then came the obstacles, the resistance, the whispers of doubt growing louder. And just like that, he hesitated. And hesitation, to them, meant weakness. It meant you were just like them. It meant you would never escape the cycle, never rise beyond the limits they had placed on you. They watched, waiting for the inevitable. The moment when the weight of it all would become too much, when fear would sink its claws into your back and drag you down, when you would convince yourself that maybe, just maybe, they had been right all along. Because that's what hesitation does, doesn't it? It whispers the same poisonous thoughts you thought you had buried. What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough? What if this is all for nothing? And for a moment, just a moment, they were almost right. Because it was tempting, wasn't it? To go back to the comfort of the familiar, to retreat into the safety of excuses, to let go of the fight and slip back into the version of yourself that never had to carry this weight, this responsibility, this fire that burned and ached all at once. But then, something happened. Maybe it was the memory of all the nights you spent wondering what it would feel like to finally be free. Maybe it was the thought of every time they counted you out, every time they said you wouldn't make it, every time they dismissed you as if your existence was a footnote in their own story. Maybe it was simply the realization that you had already come too far to turn back now. Whatever it was, it shattered something inside of you. And suddenly the hesitation wasn't doubt, it was fuel. Because you had felt pain before. You had tasted failure, swallowed disappointment, carried the weight of every betrayal and setback. But this was different. This wasn't pain, it was clarity. It was the realization that hesitation wasn't a sign of weakness, but a moment of choice, a crossroads. And for the first time in your life, you weren't choosing fear, so you rose, not gracefully, not effortlessly, but with grit, with defiance, with a fire that refused to be extinguished. You rose, knowing that it would hurt, knowing that the road ahead would not be easy, knowing that nothing about this journey was guaranteed. But you also knew this: staying where you were was no longer an option. Now, they watch again, but this time something is different. This time, their confidence wavers, because the hesitation they were waiting for didn't break you, it built you. It sharpened you. It became the very thing that made you unstoppable. And now, they know. This time, you are not turning back. Look around you. Look at the life you've settled for, the spaces you've allowed yourself to shrink into, the roads you never traveled because you convinced yourself you weren't ready. Do you feel it? The weight of everything you never became? The echoes of choices you didn't make? The dreams that once burned in your chest, now nothing more than whispers of what could have been? This is the cost of playing small, not just discomfort, not just regret, loss, real tangible loss. The kind that steals from you in ways you don't even recognize until it's too late. It's not just about the pain of what you've endured, it's about the life you never got to live because you let fear decide for you. Think about the opportunities that passed you by, the moments when you stood at the edge of something greater but let hesitation pull you back. The doors that were open, waiting for you to step through, but you stayed behind, convincing yourself that the timing wasn't right, that you weren't good enough, that someone else deserved it more. And while you were waiting, while you were convincing yourself that tomorrow was a safer bet than today, others were moving forward. Others who had no more talent than you, no more strength, no more potential, but they had something you didn't. They had the audacity to believe they belonged where you were too afraid to go. So they took the opportunities you hesitated on. They stepped forward while you stood still. They grew while you stayed the same. And now you see it. The ones who weren't smarter than you, weren't stronger than you, weren't more deserving than you, they are living the life you once imagined for yourself. That stings, doesn't it? To see what could have been, to know that the only thing standing between you and everything you wanted was a hesitation that never should have existed. But don't turn away from it. Don't try to numb the frustration or push the thoughts aside. Feel it, let it burn, let it consume you. Because this isn't about dwelling in regret. This is about never letting it happen again. This is about realizing that time is not something you can afford to waste anymore. That every second you spend waiting is another second you are handing away to someone else. That every hesitation is not just a pause, it is a decision to stay behind. And if that doesn't make your blood boil, if that doesn't shake you awake, then ask yourself this: how much more are you willing to lose? How many more years will you give away to fear? How many more moments will you let slip through your fingers before you finally decide that enough is enough? Because that's what this is, a decision, not fate, not bad luck, a choice. And you're done choosing small. You're done watching from the sidelines. You're done being the one who hesitates while the rest of the world moves forward. Because if you keep playing small, you already know how this story ends. And you did not come this far just to let it end like that. They felt it before they saw it. Before the words left your mouth, before your actions betrayed the shift, they sensed something was different. Maybe it was the way you stood, no longer shrinking into the background. Maybe it was the way your silence no longer felt like submission, but calculation. Maybe it was the way you no longer looked at them the same. No longer searching for approval, no longer seeking permission. At first, they dismissed it. They told themselves it was nothing, just another phase, another spark that would burn out like the ones before. But deep down, something unsettled them. There was something in the way you carried yourself now, a quiet certainty that had never been there before, a weight to your presence that demanded attention without you having to say a word. And then they heard it in your voice, the way you spoke. Not with arrogance, but with a conviction so unshakable that they could no longer pretend you were the same. You didn't apologize for taking up space anymore. You didn't explain yourself. You simply existed in your power. And that alone was enough to rattle them, because the moment you chose yourself over your fears, over their expectations, over the identity they had forced upon you, that was the moment everything changed. The moment they lost the version of you they could control. The moment you became someone they didn't know how to handle. You stopped waiting, stopped hesitating, stopped looking back, and suddenly the same people who used to mock you, who used to dismiss you, who used to look at you with casual indifference, they weren't laughing anymore, because they felt it. The shift. The undeniable truth that the person they had doubted was no longer playing by their rules. And now it's too late for them. They can regret it all they want. They can try to rewrite the past, try to convince themselves that they always saw your potential, that they always knew you would rise. But it doesn't matter, because now they no longer matter. They had their chance to believe in you. They had their chance to stand with you. But they chose doubt. They chose indifference. They chose to underestimate you. And now they will regret it, because the version of you they once ignored is gone, and the one who remains is unstoppable. No one cheers for you in the beginning. No applause, no validation, no warm encouragement to keep going. At first, all you have is yourself, the quiet battle between who you were and who you are becoming. It's lonely, isn't it? The space between breaking free and being recognized for it. The place where the work is hardest, where the nights are longest, where the fight is most brutal. This is the part they don't talk about. Because rising is not beautiful in the beginning. It is not a grand, cinematic moment with swelling music and an audience waiting to celebrate you. It is ugly, it is painful, it is isolating. And it requires something from you that most people are not willing to give. It demands discipline when no one is watching, effort when no one is acknowledging you. It demands that you show up for yourself again and again, even when the results are invisible, even when the progress feels slow, even when doubt claws at your mind like an unrelenting beast. There will be days when the weight of it feels unbearable, when you will question why you started, when you will wonder if it's all worth it. There will be moments when your past self whispers that it would be easier to turn back, to return to comfort, to settle for the life you once accepted. But here's the truth. Comfort is the graveyard of growth. And you didn't come this far to be buried. So you push forward, without permission, without approval, without applause, because you have learned something they never wanted you to know. You do not need them. You never did. You no longer seek validation from those who once doubted you. You no longer wait for them to see your worth before you claim it for yourself. You have become something different now. Self-made, self-driven, self-sufficient. And that terrifies them, because you are no longer playing by their rules. You are no longer waiting for recognition, no longer craving their acceptance. You are rising, relentlessly, unapologetically, and one day, when the dust settles, when the work has turned into something undeniable, they will have no choice but to see what they tried to ignore. But by then, it won't matter to you, because by then, you won't need them at all. At first, they ignored you. They saw your effort, your discipline, your quiet transformation, but they convinced themselves it was temporary, a phase, a desperate attempt to become something more before reality dragged you back down. But then something shifted. You didn't stop. You didn't break. You didn't return to the version of yourself they were comfortable with. And that's when the fear set in, because now they saw it. The thing they never expected. You were rising, without them, without their approval, without their validation. And suddenly, they weren't so sure anymore. Suddenly, the foundation of their superiority began to crack. Because if you, the one they underestimated, could rise beyond them, what did that say about them? So they did what they always do when someone threatens the order they've built. They tried to stop you. Not with open confrontation. No, that would require admitting that they see you as a threat. Instead, they worked in shadows, in whispers, in carefully placed doubts meant to slow you down. Sabotage disguised as concern. Jealousy masked as advice. Silent opposition wrapped in polite smiles. They told you that maybe you were moving too fast, that you should be careful, that change is risky, that you should think twice before stepping too far out of line. They disguised their fear as wisdom, their insecurity as caution, their own self-doubt as guidance. And when that didn't work, when you continued to rise despite their carefully laid traps, they changed tactics. Some distanced themselves from you, as if your growth was an insult to their existence. Some whispered about you behind your back, trying to rewrite the story before you could tell it yourself. Some acted as if your success was somehow unearned, as if they were entitled to an explanation for why you had outgrown them. But here's the truth, they were never ready to admit. They were never above you. They were only ahead because you hesitated, because you held yourself back, because you believed in their lies for too long. And now that you have stepped forward, now that you have broken free, they can feel the shift, the undeniable, irreversible truth that they can no longer outrun. You are no longer behind them, you have surpassed them. And no matter how hard they try to stop you now, it's too late. Because once you taste freedom, once you recognize your own power, there is no going back. At first, you wanted to tell them. You wanted to prove to them that you were changing, that you were rising, that you were no longer the person they thought they knew. You wanted to show them your progress, to make them see what they had overlooked for so long. But then you learned something powerful. Silence is your greatest weapon, because when they know your plans, they try to stop them. When they see your growth, they try to undermine it. When they sense your potential, they plant doubts in your mind, hoping you'll question yourself before you even have the chance to succeed. So you moved differently. You stopped announcing your every step. You stopped explaining yourself to people who had already decided to doubt you. You stopped giving them access to the blueprint of your rise. And instead, you let your success do the talking. Like a storm gathering strength beneath a calm sky you built in the shadows. While they assumed you had given up, you were working. While they convinced themselves that you had hit your limit, you were sharpening your skills. While they laughed, while they dismissed you, while they continued believing the version of you they had created in their minds, you were transforming. And then, when they least expected it, the storm hit. They looked up one day and realized they could no longer ignore you. Your success was undeniable. It wasn't something they could dismiss as luck. It wasn't something they could explain away. It was real. It was solid. It was standing right in front of them. And now they had no choice but to acknowledge what they had refused to see all along. And that's the beauty of moving in silence. They never see it coming. You never needed to argue with them, never needed to fight for their approval, never needed to convince them of your worth. Because now, they are the ones left questioning themselves. Now they are the ones wondering how they missed the warning signs. Now they are the ones scrambling to make sense of the shift they can no longer deny. So ask yourself this: what will they say when they can no longer pretend you were never meant to rise? Because that moment is coming, and when it does, the only thing louder than their silence will be your success. There was a moment, a single undeniable moment, when they realized you were no longer the person they had dismissed. Maybe it was a conversation where your words carried a weight they weren't expecting. Maybe it was the way you walked into a room, commanding attention without seeking it. Maybe it was the moment they heard your name in places they never imagined it would be, spoken with respect instead of indifference. At first, they tried to ignore it. They told themselves it was nothing, just a temporary phase, just luck, just coincidence. But then, it kept happening, again, and again, and again, until they could no longer pretend. They looked at you and saw something unrecognizable. The quiet submission was gone. The hesitation they once counted on had disappeared. You were not who they remembered, and that terrified them, because now their disbelief turned to fear. Fear that they had underestimated you for too long. Fear that they had wasted their time doubting you, instead of preparing for the moment you would surpass them. Fear that they were never as far ahead of you as they once believed. And then came the resentment. How dare you? How dare you rise without their permission? How dare you prove them wrong? How dare you become something greater than the limits they assigned to you? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. You were supposed to stay where they left you. You were supposed to remain in the background watching while they thrived. But now they are the ones watching you. And then, beneath the resentment, beneath the bitterness, came the regret. The realization that they had a choice to believe in you, to stand beside you, to recognize your worth before the world forced them to. But they didn't. And now, it's too late, because the person they once knew no longer exists, and the one standing in front of them now is unstoppable. Every word they spoke was meant to break you. Every insult, every doubt, every casual dismissal, it was all designed to keep you small, to make sure you never step beyond the limits they set for you. They didn't just doubt you, they wanted you to doubt yourself, because if you never believed in your own power, they would never have to face the truth about their own limitations. But here's the part they never expected. You took their words and you turned them into fuel. They thought they were burying you, but every insult became a reason to rise. Every sneer became a reason to prove them wrong. Every whispered doubt became a fire in your chest, a reminder that the only way forward was to become so undeniable that they could never question you again. And now, here they are, drowning in the weight of their own words. Every time they see you, they remember what they once said. Every moment they witness your success, they are forced to relive the times they laughed, the times they rolled their eyes, the times they looked right at you and dismissed your potential like it was nothing. And now those same words haunt them. Because they were wrong, and there's no way to take it back. They feel it in their chest, the sinking realization that they chose the wrong side of history, that they could have been part of your journey, but instead, they became proof of your strength. And that stings, doesn't it? To know that they spent so much energy trying to keep you down, only to realize that their very attempts to stop you became the reason you rose. But here's the part they really can't stand. You never needed revenge. You never had to fight them. You never had to prove anything to them directly. You didn't waste your energy trying to change their minds, trying to win their approval, trying to convince them to believe in you, because now your success is the punishment. They have to live with it. Live with the knowledge that they tried to stop you and failed. Live with the reality that they wasted their time doubting someone who was never meant to stay beneath them. Live with the truth that the very person they overlooked is now the one they can't stop looking at. And the best part? You don't even care anymore, because your focus isn't on them. It never was. And that is what breaks them the most. At first, they avoided you, pretended they didn't notice the shift, ignored your rise, acted as if nothing had changed. But now, they have no choice but to acknowledge you. Your name is spoken in rooms they never expected. Your success is undeniable. And suddenly, the ones who once doubted you are trying to rewrite history. They show up with carefully crafted smiles, with words dipped in false admiration. They tell you they always believed in you, that they knew you had it in you all along. They act as if they were part of your journey, as if they played a role in your success, as if their doubt was just tough love meant to push you forward. They rewrite their past so they don't have to face the shame of their choices. But you remember. You remember the silence when you needed support. You remember the laughter when you struggled. You remember the way they looked at you, not with belief, but with dismissal. And now, just because you've built yourself into something they can no longer ignore, they think they have a right to stand beside you. But here's the truth. They cannot come back. Not because you're holding on to resentment, not because you seek revenge, but because they never earned the right to walk this path with you. Where were they when you needed encouragement? Where were they when you doubted yourself, when you were on the edge of giving up? Where were they when you were building in silence, when you were struggling, when you were doing the work no one else was willing to do? They weren't there. And now, they don't get to be here. Because this version of you, the one who has risen beyond their expectations, requires protection. Your energy, your growth, your success cannot be compromised by those who never saw your value until it was too late. So you set boundaries, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom, not out of anger, but out of necessity. Because the people who couldn't stand by you in your struggle do not deserve a seat at your table in your victory. And when they ask why, when they look at you with wide eyes, pretending to be hurt, pretending they don't understand, you tell them the truth they never wanted to hear. You never needed them then, and you sure as hell don't need them now. You turn, just for a moment, one final glance, not because you need to, not because their presence matters anymore, but because this is the last time they will ever see you as anything other than untouchable. And there they stand, the ones who once dismissed you, the ones who never saw your worth, the ones who whispered your failures louder than your potential. They are silent now. No more laughter, no more arrogance. No more sneering confidence that you would never rise beyond their expectations. Instead, their faces tell the story they will never admit out loud. Shock, because deep down, they never truly believed you could do it. No matter how much they try to pretend otherwise, no matter how much they rewrite their past, the truth remains. They thought you would break. Regret, not just for doubting you, but for what they lost in the process. They had a choice, once, to stand beside you or to stand against you. They chose wrong, and now they will live with that choice. They will replay the moments when they could have encouraged you, when they could have believed in you, when they could have aligned themselves with someone destined for greatness, but they didn't. And now it's too late. Realization, the most painful of all, because now they understand. Now they see the truth that was in front of them all along. Now they know that their words, their doubt, their attempts to keep you small, none of it worked. Now they realize that they were never above you. They were only ahead of you because you were still holding yourself back. And now, as they stand there watching, helpless, unable to undo the past, they understand the cruelest truth of all. You made them watch their own downfall. Every moment they doubted you, it built the person standing before them now. Every time they tried to hold you down, it only made your rise more inevitable. They were the architects of their own defeat, and they never saw it coming. And the best part, there's nothing they can do about it. So you turn back around. You don't need to say a word, because you've already won. You will never shrink again, not for them, not for anyone, not for the comfort of those who once doubted you, nor for the insecurities of those who fear your power. That version of you is gone, the one who second-guessed, who hesitated, who looked for permission before taking a step forward, buried in the ashes of the past. Because now, you are unshakable. This isn't about a single victory. This isn't about proving them wrong once and then slipping back into old patterns. This is about who you've become. A foundation so strong that no insult, no failure, no rejection can ever shake it again. Because now, you understand the truth. Real power isn't about what you gain. It's about what you refuse to lose. You refuse to lose your voice. You refuse to lose your confidence. You refuse to let anyone dictate your worth ever again. This is what separates those who rise once from those who never fall again. They don't just build success. They build an identity that cannot be touched, no matter who doubts them, no matter what obstacles stand in their way. So what does it take? What are the principles of lasting success? 1. That's self-trust over external validation. You no longer look for approval. You decide your worth. If no one claps for you, you still keep going. 2. Consistency over emotion. You don't move based on feelings. Some days will be harder than others, but success is built by showing up even when you don't feel like it. 3. Control over reactions. You no longer let their words or opinions dictate your actions. They can doubt, they can question, they can sneer. It does not matter. Forward growth over comfort. You refuse to stay where it's safe. You will always push forward, always seek more, always evolve. 5. Decisiveness over hesitation. No more waiting, no more asking for permission, no more delaying what you know needs to be done. You take action, you move, you make it happen. This is why you will never shrink again. Because the mindset that once kept you small no longer exists. And that is what makes you unstoppable. Winning once is not the goal. staying ahead is. Because success is not a finish line, it's a constant climb. Too many people rise, only to fall back into old habits. They get comfortable, they stop pushing, they let their hunger fade, and before they know it, they're exactly where they started. That will not be you. So how do you prevent self-sabotage once you've won? How do you stay ahead while the rest of the world slows down? 1. Never let comfort weaken you. Success is dangerous when it makes you soft. The moment you stop pushing yourself is the moment you start falling behind. Stay sharp, stay hungry. 2. Keep setting bigger goals. What felt impossible before is now your reality. So now you aim higher. Push past the limits of what you once thought was possible. You don't settle at the top, you build a new summit. 3. Protect your mindset ruthlessly. Just because you've won doesn't mean doubt won't try to creep back in. Guard your thoughts. Surround yourself with people who push you forward, not ones who hold you back. 4. Learn from those above you. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Find people ahead of you, study them, adapt, grow. 5. Stay unpredictable. The moment they think they have you figured out, you shift, you evolve. You move in ways they never expect. Never be stagnant. Never be ordinary. 6. Remember who you were before you won. Don't forget the fire that got you here. Don't forget the hunger, the pain, the late nights, the sacrifices. Stay connected to the version of you that refused to quit. This is how you stay ahead. You don't slow down. You don't get comfortable. You don't let yourself become what you once fought against. Because you didn't come this far just to fade into the background. You came to stay. Look at yourself. Really look. You are no longer the person they once knew. The person they underestimated, the person they doubted, the person who second-guessed every decision, who sought approval, who lived within the limitations placed upon them. That version of you is gone. What stands in their place is unrecognizable. You move differently now, with certainty, with power. Your presence alone commands attention, even from those who once dismissed you. You no longer wait to be chosen. You choose yourself. You no longer hesitate. You take action. You no longer seek validation. You know your worth. The ones who once laughed at you wouldn't dare now. Not because you've changed physically, not because you've gained more than they ever expected, but because your energy is different. They can feel it, the quiet authority, the unwavering confidence, the undeniable proof that you are no longer someone they can overlook. And that scares them, because the person standing before them now, they don't know how to handle. You no longer fit into the version of you they created in their minds. They can't talk down to you. They can't diminish you. They can't make you feel small anymore. You are no longer who they knew. And it's not just them, it's you. You don't even recognize your past self anymore. The one who hesitated, the one who played small, the one who doubted their own power. That version of you feels like a stranger. Because now, you own every room you walk into. Now, you speak with certainty. Now, you are the force they never saw coming. And the best part, you are just getting started. This is it. The moment they will never forget. The moment that will haunt them long after you've moved on. They thought they could break you. They failed. They thought their words would stop you. They only made you stronger. They thought they could bury you beneath doubt, beneath rejection, beneath their shallow expectations. But they never realized you were a seed. And now, they stand in the shadow of everything they tried to destroy, watching, silent, powerless. Because the very person they underestimated, ignored, and doubted is the one they can never escape. You don't need their recognition. You don't need their approval. You never did. Because now, you know exactly who you are. Unshakable, limitless, unstoppable. And while they remain frozen in their regrets, drowning in the weight of their own disbelief, you walk forward, without looking back, without hesitation, without fear. They will remember this. They will remember you. Because you are the one they never saw coming, and now they will never forget.